Hi, I am Brent Feldman, and we're back with another episode of Mix and Matchbox. Today, we actually have a very special episode for International Women's Month, and I am joined by a group of Matchboxers. So, hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So, we're actually joined by individually Rachel, who's a lead content strategist here, Alana, business analyst, Amber, digital strategy account manager, and Jamie, our accounts director. And so they are actually here to kind of contribute thoughts on all the questions that we have today. I'm very excited to jump in, and I know that there's a lot of perspective, hopefully, that we can gain from some of the questions here. So I'm super excited about it. Yeah, and welcome, and hopefully we can jump right in.
Sounds good.
Cool. I'll jump into the first one, which is how have women reshaped the tech landscape as well as the culture of tech? A really big one right off the bat here.
Oh man.
Anybody want?
If we want to get back and like go way back in history, I will say, and this was, surprising to me when I was younger and I read this, but like a lot of the computer programmers, the very first ones were women.
Yeah.
It was considered like a busy work kind of job that men didn't always want to like trouble themselves with. So, women actually shaped a lot of like that process and, that landscape as a whole, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't Rita Hayworth. It was an old Hollywood actress.
Ada Lovelace or something like.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. Now I'm gonna have to look it up while we're on this. Because there's a really famous Hollywood actress Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr came up with the modern algorithm. Like she's sort of the originator of the algorithm or something like that. Boy, I better check my facts while we're actually doing this before I go off saying something like that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to fact check myself. Ada Lovelace was the one who was technically considered like the world's first computer programmer, but that was like back in the mid 1800s. So yeah.
Well, anyway, but yeah, Hedy Lamarr had something to do with all of this as well. Something to do with like the algorithm that's kind of used for the internet, the creation of the internet, essentially.
That is cool.
Yeah. So, Wi-Fi. Oh, that's what it was. Wi-Fi, GPS. She was like the originator of that, and Bluetooth communication systems. She's basically pioneered that technology. Okay, so a little bit different, not the same thing,
but those are not small feats.
No, they're not. Yeah, and she was like a really famous, actress back in the 20s, 30s, 40s. But yeah, I mean, as far as today goes, I don't necessarily, because I'm not like a programmer or a analyst or like, I don't do like super sophisticated tech things. I don't know that I have the same perspective as other women in those roles and what that might feel like. But I know from my growing up and my education, like it wasn't always pushed on girls to exceed or excel in like math and science and stuff like that. I think there was a big hubbub about it in the 80s and 90s and in education in general that, like more boys got called on, and they would do like sort of studies and see that the teachers were calling more on the boys in math and science topic stuff, whereas like the girls were more, there's the stereotype of girls being better at communication or whatever, and things like that, and everybody's an individual. And I think that's something that girls bring to the table, though. Like I think women who, our brains, like literally men's and women's brains are wired completely differently, so it can only improve certain ideas and thoughts and things if you bring this other completely different way of thinking to the table. I think, because like even in medicine and psychology, like primarily every study has been done on male subjects through the centuries. And, it's sort of like, well, what about the female subject? And we're starting to learn that, like even when it comes to like neurotypical versus, atypical subjects. Women present with autism, Asperger's symptoms differently. It presents itself differently than it does in the male subject, and that's why they don't get diagnosed until they're in their like 20s, 30s, whatever, and have to learn all these coping mechanisms and stuff. And I think it brings more to the table when you have like a different perspective.
That's cool. Actually, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jamie.
No, I was just going to say, from my experience, so I am newer to being fully immersed in the tech industry, but I've always worked kind of alongside it in some of my other roles. And from my experience, what I've seen, and it may be the role that I've been in on kind of the account side, is I tend to see females bringing the people aspect of tech in a little bit more. So while I've worked alongside developers or other men in the tech world, sometimes I'm bringing the perspective of our customer, of the person that's going to be using the tech and how that's going to relate to them. Not saying that men don't do that as well. I'm sure that they do, just as women are developers and work on more heavy on that tech side too. But I feel like I've seen that in my experience, that bringing that more people aspect and kind of looking at it from a different lens.
Yeah, I think like women, since we are evolutionary wired to be mothers, we are very like empathetic. And I think that's like a big thing that we also bring to the table, is being able to like understand like where a client is coming from and try to like ease situations and like bring that conflict resolution there. Because we are natural like project managers in our day-to-day life. I don't have kids yet, but I'm sure like Jamie and Amber, you could totally relate to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the peak of multitasking is motherhood, I think. Even though our brains can literally only attend to one thing at a time. So
that's totally cool. Oh, Alana?
Yeah, I can also agree that women are more focused on users and try to find the ways how to make them happier, not just to make great product as they see. And from my exploration, I understood that we try to find more different points of view and collect them, and to like achieve the goals for every part of the audience, not only one small part. And I think it's the biggest like influence of the women in technologies in general, like to bring more to bring more diversity and emphatic. I can't say this word. Sorry.
But the empathy, I do feel like,
yes.
Okay.
yeah, it is a big part. Yeah. And I will say, I feel like that diversity in opinion in general is like so helpful. And I mean, by the way, I'm going to just point out the me being a white male leading a discussion about women's involvement in tech. Trust me, I'm here just as a bystander and to receive the information that everybody provides, but not being an expert or anything. But I really appreciate the role of like the perspective of diversity, as well as the UX sort of capacity for injecting that empathy into, sort of like whether it be user interfaces or how people interact with things. I do feel like that if we didn't have that diversity and perspective, like honestly, we're only seeing it in one way. So yeah, that's really cool. Okay, I'll jump into the next question. What are some of the biggest challenges getting into a tech career or facing women in tech in general? Basically, we know that historically, maybe it's been even harder. But things are getting easier, but it's not necessarily a direct path to get into the tech world all the time. Or, do you have to have an engineering degree? But, I guess maybe, what are some of those challenges, even everybody here on the call is like personally faced getting into the tech world?
I know. Oh, you want to go ahead? You take it. Go.
because my way in technologies was pretty long, and I think mostly because of the stereotype that I'm a woman and it's too hard to learn coding, so I need to know a lot of algorithm. I need to know math and everything. And in my childhood, I thought that it's too complicated and I can't do it. It's not for women. But after several years, after finishing some courses, I understood, oh, it's not so hard. I didn't need anything that I thought I need. And I was a victim of my own stereotypes about women. Oh,
Oh, but
Hey, you're closer
we
up.
just got a new perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's like the stereotypes, both
Yeah.
coming from other people and what you internalize growing up. You know, like when I really sit down and think about it, there were a lot of times where I probably could have pursued more of a math or science career if I wanted to, but in my head, I would always tell myself, no, I'm a writer. I am more like a creative thinker, which it all worked out. I love, you know, writing and creating content for websites. But I think another spin on that too was like with writing, it was like, oh, well, you're going to be like writing for a news station or like an author. Like I didn't know that the tech industry was a way I could translate that. You know, it seemed like this kind of bigger, more like scary entity that wasn't as open to women. And then, you know, that as I was interviewing places, you know, my confidence like wasn't there. And, you know, I felt almost like I had imposter syndrome when I first joined. But, you know, to Alana's point, as I got into it, I was like, wow, this isn't as like big and scary as I thought it was. You know, it's just a matter of like learning and growing yourself as a professional. And yeah, anyone, you know, any woman can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like my education background, I started off in college as a biomedical engineering major. And, you know, like I had all of these things that were pushed upon me, I think, from my own family background, because I had a lot of engineers in my family. And, you know, like my dad got a degree in chemistry, my brother was a mechanical engineer, and that kind of thing. But I think I felt very underrepresented in my own classrooms and felt like I wasn't going to be able to succeed. And I eventually did get my degree in English literature. And, you know, like ultimately that is what I loved and what I cared most about. But I think, yeah, it was my own bias. It was my own, like, I'm not as smart as these men. I'm not, you know, like the things that I told myself. And imposter syndrome is like, from many of the women that I speak to, just as professionals, more women that I run into have imposter syndrome than any men that I have ever come across. And I know that even when it comes to application process, when you're applying for a job, I don't know the exact numbers, but statistically, more men will apply for jobs that they don't have the background for because they're very overconfident about like what they're going for than women will. And women will cut themselves and be like, well, it, you know, it has this one extra thing in there that I don't have, so I can't apply, you know. And like, you know, and I don't know if that's somewhat wired into like men versus women, I don't know. But for myself, you know, there was always like this sort of lack of confidence when it came to like if it's a bunch of men versus me applying for a job or like whatever, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's been my experience. So.
Ooh, does that have an impact on how you talk to other women or, you know, I guess girls in school about your career in terms of like, you know, maybe trying to like, you know, motivate them or telling it's possible, like, you know, helping assist in that, you know, sort of like, no, it's cool. Please, you know, you should be here too.
Yeah, well, if I had more exposure to young women who were school age right now, and of course I have 2 boys, so like I'm not even going to be able to like coach my children on anything, but yeah, I feel like girls today should go for whatever they want to go for. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, there's you know, women can play all kinds of sports now and all kinds of amazing things, and so and I'm not like we're all equal. I understand that there's biologically a very big difference in the the way that our brains function. Like, so we can't be the same, but we bring equally amazing things to the table. And I do feel like there's just, I don't know if there's just more anxiety or fear from some women, and I'm hoping that's changing. I'm hoping that education has changed. And again, I have boys, so I'm not really going to be privy to what it might be like as a girl right now.
Yeah, and I also think like a lot of women maybe aren't given the proper like tools where it's like, you know, there are so many ways to educate yourself if you do want to break into the tech industry. You know, I'm sure Alana, like you could speak to all the coding resources there are out there, or even just like classes you can sign up for. You know, I taught myself SEO. I had like the writing aspect, the marketing, you know, mindset, but that was kind of the piece that was missing. And I didn't realize that there were so many resources out there, and that, you know, if you have the drive and you really want to get into it, you know, it's there for you. And like, I would encourage a lot of other women to reach out to women in the tech industry. Because I think I actually reached out to Colby, who used to work here, and asked her, like, do you have any advice on, you know, how to kind of get myself into this arena? And, you know, it just worked out that I ended up working at Matchbox, but I did message her because I was like, she's a woman in tech. I aspire to be that. And I encourage other women to do that. Like, don't be scared to approach other women that are in the spot that you aspire to be. Cause like, as a woman in tech, if someone approached me, I would like welcome that with open arms, you know?
Yeah, I think I was just reading an article before this because I was trying to prepare a little more for, for this interview. But one of there were like 3 things listed for women in tech who felt were missing, and is why they like changed jobs or whatever it was. One of the things is a female role models and mentorship. And that is something that, you know, like I myself being a busy working mom, like I find that I maybe don't have time to like mentor somebody else, you know, another woman in this industry. But I know that I would love to have, you know, love to have that kind of person that I could call on and be like, you know, how would you handle this situation or whatever. So
Cool. Jamie, Alana, did you have any?
Yeah, I also read about the role models, and the first thought was, is it so important? Then I started to collect my own experience, and I remember that I tried to find the women who was like successful in technologies, and then I understood that for the first years, it's very important to have some mentors, or just understanding that women can be really successful in any kind of technologies, no matter is it coding or any other spheres of digital.
That's cool. Wow, awesome. Well, that's really cool. And the next, you know, question here is really about like, you know, because I think everybody touched on this just a little bit, but I mean, like, are there still, you know, in anybody's opinion, cultural strides that need to be made in order to make it, you know, either better or easier for women to get into the field?
Well, I would say the answer to that is obviously yes. I think there's definitely still work to be done, right? But I will say that I think I've seen a very significant shift in, even if it's just the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, I don't know how much I hear now, and I do have a daughter, but how much I hear now about STEM and the push for getting girls specifically into programs, whether that be engineering, math, science, whatever it might be, and just the general sense of making things like science and math more fun for children. So I think that push that's happening is going to be incredible. And I think we will see in the next 10 to 15 years more women in tech just because of that, because it really has been a focus for educators to make that something that is more top of mind for young girls. The other thing I would like to mention too is around flexibility in the workplace. I think I see some of the most flexibility in the technology industry, honestly, from my experience, as well as just what I've seen other people experience too, I think people maybe just don't know that as much. You know, a lot of the work that's done in the technology field can be done at any time. And so I think there is a huge piece of flexibility there that is so important for women, especially working mothers.
Mhm.
So I think just making that more well known and really leaning into that, companies that are in that industry leaning into that will make and attract more women to the field. So
I completely agree. And maybe it's, again, I speak more from the perspective of a mom in this industry, because I've had jobs in the past where, like, you know, I've had 2 children. So, you know, I would take a maternity leave and I would come back and I'd have to do things like pump, because, you know, that's what I wanted to do to feed my baby. And so, you know, I've had to like take over an entire conference room and lock the door just so that I could, like, you know, like, I know that there are laws in place for things like this, but I also know that every work environment doesn't naturally have a location for things or stuff like that. And so, you know, I think from as a working mom, my perspective is that of like, I think that needs to be a huge consideration, because if you get to a certain level as a working woman and you do potentially have children, like, you're at an age where you're more senior and, you know, you're going to have to take time off work for certain things. And so, you know, like you were saying, Jamie, like, flexibility is a huge part of it. Like, being able to take time off when my kids are sick or whatever. And I know too, like, employers should really look at gaps in employment with women with children, because, you know, just because a woman took off a few years to stay home and raise her kids does not mean she isn't just as qualified for a position, especially if she kept up with, you know, sort of like the learnings of that industry or whatever. And I know that that's something that a lot of women choose to do because childcare is expensive, or whatever. So, but again, I've got the mom perspective, not other things.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for companies as a whole too, I think as employees, it's really easy to see through like the companies that are just checking a box when it comes to diversity. And that's not just with women, that's with, you know, people of color, LGBTQ communities, things like that, you know, like, it's very transparent. I feel like in today's climate, to like pick up on that and know, like, are they genuinely like wanting me for my skills, or is it just to check a box, you know?
Cool. Well, I think that honestly that it's interesting, and this is just from, you know, my perspective here too. I toss this in because not about me, but regardless, I will say the flexibility in the workplace, I take that, you know, super seriously, because my wife too is a working mother, and like having the flexibility to work at home for her was you know, like really impactful. And especially for, yeah, things like as simple as like, yeah, breastfeeding, thinking that, yeah, you don't have to go or work out what conference room, you know, quote unquote, you're gonna have to take over. You can do it in the comfort of your own home. So I do hope that you know, being able to work from home brings more opportunity for people who need flexible work schedules, so that it expands that reach, so that we can, you know, sort of get those people into the workforce, as opposed to them having to sit on the sidelines or feeling like they must because of, you know, the life and things that happen. So yeah, I'm definitely I'm excited about that progress to work for home for that reason. Um, so how does marketing as a career path affect the nature of women in tech roles?
I'm just going to come out and say I see more women in marketing and advertising than maybe other tech industries, because there's so much when it comes to like empathy and communication. It involves like working together and collaborating. And not that other tech things don't, but it just means that I think women maybe feel more comfortable in marketing and that being their avenue into tech potentially. And I don't know if that, you know, I'm sure there's some sort of systemic thing that causes that, but But that's what I've seen, and I feel like that makes it a good entry point for women to get into tech, and then maybe they'll be introduced into things that like they become passionate about and can really like focus their career on, and it may take them in a totally different direction, but I think it's a great entry point for women.
Yeah, and even just, starting in a junior like kind of marketing role, it's another way to kind of move into a leadership role too, which, was something I was able to do and like, pretty early in my career, which, I never envisioned at this stage in my life, which is, very exciting for me. But I think for a lot of women, they build that confidence. And as you said, all these other doors are opened through maybe coming into that junior role, and they're able to find the mentors, learn the skills, and really grow in whichever direction they want within like the marketing industry or just the tech industry as a whole.
Yeah, I think that for me, when I was going to school, I have a marketing advertising background. When I was going to school, it was not even a consideration to like tech was not even anywhere on my radar, or really honestly anyone that I knew or was friends with. It was really, for the most part where I went, it was really like, do you want to be a teacher, or do you want to go into or a nurse, or go into marketing or advertising? I actually initially started to be a teacher, and for a variety of reasons ended up in advertising. But even then in advertising, it was, okay, all right, now you're in advertising. Do you want to be creative, or do you want to be on the account side? Like it was literally that, those were the simple things that were asked, and you had to make those decisions to go into the field. And that wasn't, I mean, like to think not that long ago, right?
It was not.
But I do think I have to imagine it has changed, right? Like the conversation while you're at school and college has to be somewhat different now than what it was then. But I agree. I think that marketing, advertising feels like a very natural role for women to be in, and that as a door into a technology role of some sort makes so much sense, and feels like a really natural fit.
Yeah, and I watched statistics about the women in technologies in Ukraine, and marketing takes 64% of like women comparing to the men. The only other field that we have more women is human resources.
Mm-hmm.
As 90% of women are there.
Yep.
But not too much women in technical specialties, like 17% or something like this. But the most marketers that I know are women, and only several of them are men. So I think it's really like a great starting point to be involved in technologies, and then women can find the better way how they can develop like in marketing, or even switch in other technology professions. Like it's like organic way to be a digital specialist.
Yeah, and what's really cool, like I know this doesn't have to do with marketing as an entry point, but tech is one of those industries where like you don't even have to, I'm gonna say this with a little trepidation, you don't have to have a college degree. Like if you're that person who figures out how to do something amazing and you just tinker around with stuff with your own life experience, sometimes that leads you in a direction that college publications, if you're learning something in a classroom that involves a textbook of any sort, it's going to be outdated by the time it's published. Like things move so fast in tech and so fast in digital marketing and things like that, that there's no way college curriculum could keep up with it really. I mean, they can teach you the basics, but it's going to be a lot of on-the-job learning. And so that's where, like, again, in industry like marketing, you're going to get on-the-job experience that will help you maybe shape what you're going to do. So.
Cool. As far as some of the lessons maybe that everybody has learned while in this sort of industry, whether it be, like marketing or tech, are there any like nuggets or takeaways you would like to like, pass on about whether it be, like things through the job or people that you've faced that you feel like that there's, some sort of lesson in that is important for maybe other people coming into the industry to know or understand?
I think the most important part is to be ready learning always. I think it's that kind of profession that you can't stop learning. Everything changes so fast. And even if you want to go into the maternity leave, you will return in several years and everything will be changed. And you need to be ready for this. And I think it's the biggest challenge because not every person is ready to learn always and to pass courses, videos, everything. It's a big challenge for some of women too, especially with kids when you need to have this extra time for learning.
Yeah, that's been my biggest, honestly, my biggest takeaway in my 6 months so far that I've been at Matchbox is really that things change so quickly, and having like an open and curious mind is probably one of the most important things, because many times, just from my experience recently, many times when I ask a question, there's not just one answer. There's multiple ways that you can do it and different ways to approach it. So being someone that works very well under a schedule and process, also having to have that flexibility of knowing it's it's not always going to go exactly how you expect it to, and you have to be open and flexible and just curious as you move throughout, whether that be a project or whatever it might be.
I've learned to read the room sometimes in ways that I probably wouldn't have been as cautious about, maybe how I communicate or things like that, because I have experienced male clients who, are just will not look at me in the room because they think I don't know as much as like my male counterpart. Like I don't get the same level of respect, and not that they're being outwardly disrespectful. It's just this innate thing that they just have this assumption internally that I might not be as, like analytically inclined or, whatever as my male counterpart. And so I have experienced, I have to learn to figure out, first of all, that I don't have to prove myself to anyone. But second of all, how can I do my work in a way that does show that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm not just, some warm body that they're keeping because they have to meet a quota or whatever. But also, I've learned about professionalism, because tech can be a very casual industry. Tech is one of those industries like you can kind of show up dressing in a way that wouldn't be okay in a more corporate environment. But you also can't maintain that casual demeanor all the time. I've learned about boundaries and things like that when it comes to being in this industry. And early on in my career, I had a female executive who was sort of like, kind of helping me out with certain things. And I was, I very flippantly used the word love about something. I was like, oh, I'd love to have you come in for blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you can't use that word. You shouldn't, like she was very adamant about certain aspects of professionalism. And so, I'm always very careful when I'm typing up messages and things like that to like, am I communicating what I'm trying to communicate to a client or in a situation? Doesn't mean I don't, fall back into more casual ways of talking sometimes, but those are some of my takeaways.
And to that point, like as a copywriter, or when I do like create copy for a website, I've gotten from male clients where they're like, this is too light and fun. And like, they just assume because I'm a woman writer that my writing is going to reflect that, And so, that's been a challenge in some instances, like with that, or even as you were discussing, Amber, like they'll listen to me say something, then they'll turn for validation from like a male counterpart. And I think my biggest piece of advice would be always be your own cheerleader, not your worst enemy, because it's so easy for me as a woman to fall down that like slippery slope of, well, do I actually know what I'm talking about? Like, does he maybe know more than me? You know, you start to question yourself, and you have to like silence those little voices and find that inner confidence and be like, no, I do. Like, I know what I'm talking about, you know, despite the reaction you might get from clients, because you can't control their reaction or what they're going to say, but you can control your demeanor and your confidence. So yeah, I would always, you know, advise women to, you know, ignore that little voice in your head that's saying you're not good enough, because we are born with it, unfortunately. Everyone is in a way. So yeah, always have confidence in yourself.
And
Cool. Awesome.
and don't underestimate yourself, you know, enough to be here.
That's great. Awesome. Okay, big question here. What are some of the biggest opportunities in tech for women?
I mean, I think like leadership roles in general, I think once you enter the tech industry, you're able to kind of grow yourself as a professional, your skills, and there's a lot of upward mobility there. You know, so I think that's one avenue where there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, if it's available. I do know that there's still a lot of statistics out there where the C-suite is just one of those places where there's a very small percentage of women. And, you know, I think it's really great to see, you know, companies that are doing things differently. And I know it didn't last very long, but I know like a lot of, you know, like Yahoo had a female CEO for a while, and she had just come in off of maternity leave. So like it was, for me, I was like, woo, yeah, a mom as a CEO of a tech thing. But yeah, it's if you can find that opportunity, that's great. I would like to see more women in those roles, honestly. But when it comes to opportunities, like I think if you find yourself at least at a company where there's more freedom to share your thoughts and your ideas, and you're not in a place where you feel like you can't open your mouth and say something, if you have a good idea, I mean, that's your opportunity. Like if you find a solution to a problem that people haven't considered before, run with it, because that idea is your opportunity, I think, a lot of times.
Also, maybe to women, like, don't be afraid to start your own company if that's an avenue you want to go down. You know, I feel like that isn't talked about enough. And if you want to be a woman CEO, it's not the journey for everyone. But if that's something that interests you, you know, have that confidence and go for it, because, you know, we need more women-owned businesses out there.
Cool. Jamie, Alana, any other big thoughts?
I don't know that I have anything different to share than what Rachel and Amber shared, but yeah, for me, it really is the leadership thing, and I see it from both sides. Amber, I see it as there aren't as many, so that leads me to think it's an opportunity. I think we definitely have to push harder for it to get there, but I think that's probably the biggest opportunity that I would see.
I think also technologies is a great way to be independent more and to grow your career and to be sure that you have enough experience, enough salary, everything to be independent in any situation. Because, you know, a lot of women left Ukraine and moved to other countries, and I saw a lot of different courses and programs that they can learn and like become an designer, manager, engineer, any profession, and to start their life from scratch in technologies. And it's really easier than any other profession in country you don't know.
That's great. I will jump on the back bandwagon of women in leadership in general, I do want to say that, like, I feel like those are really big opportunities for companies to, you know, kind of progress and grow and really and just make sure that they're including the opinions of others. And I think for a long time, you know, there has been this kind of male hegemony in tech that, you know, seems to persist. Obviously, it seems like it's getting better, you know, but I will say that, you know, the more that those companies can show strength through the leadership of, you know, kind of empowering women through the company. I feel like I really hope that that does broaden everybody's opinion, perspective, and, you know, just makes every workplace healthier too. So I think that is super important. So I guess as far as what, you know, what would anybody say is the starting point for, you know, shaping perception of what a tech job is for women who want to get into the field? You know, where can people, you know, find that entry point? I know that we've talked about, like, you know, marketing in general, but how, you know, how can people find, you know, where to jump in for themselves? Like, and I know that this probably comes from like different perspectives, different opinions, you know, like things that you're either interested or, you know, learning about. But yeah, where and whether that's your own perspective or what you can encourage others to do. But yeah, where can people find those starting points for women, especially?
There's a lot of online learning opportunity, like tons. I mean, look at any sort of software or like community where there may be people who are in tech. There are all kinds of courses that can be found for free. So if money is a barrier for some people, I know there's a lot of free opportunities out there that anyone from Google to, you know, whoever might be leaving out there to be available. And, you know, like, you know, some women may have a more, be more inclined from an analytic mind and a logical mind, and some women may be more like mechanically inclined. And I know that there's opportunities there too. If, you know, if for someone tech isn't necessarily like a software type of thing, you know, it's more of a, you know, building out the hardware and the physical tech or the physical aspect of tech. I'm speaking in generalities because I don't even know what what some of those things are. But I know that, you know, getting online and just searching for stuff that, you know, just take classes and learn on your own. It's so many opportunities.
Yeah, I know. Excuse me. I know some universities will do like kind of just quick programs where you can just join just to learn certain skills. So definitely always check out your local like colleges and universities. There's also, so like Amber said, so many online resources. You know, if you do have the money, definitely, like, I know SEMrush has an academy, Yoast does for SEO specifically, and I've even taken those courses and they're great. And I know there's, I think Savvy Coders is one, Alana, that they have for coding. I'm not in that arena, but I know there are a lot on that front as well.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
A lot of courses and free. And I remember that when I started, one of the helpful resources for me was Free Code Camp, with a lot of information and practical and theory about coding. And now they even have more different courses, so you can select, oh, do you want coding or maybe testing or maybe something else, and why don't you to use YouTube? A lot of videos, a lot of free videos, especially for every entries who want to understand what are the opportunities, what are the differences between technologies. And it's very helpful to understand what is your way and to try. It's the biggest thing. Start and try and understand then, is it for you or no?
Yeah, and I think a big thing is don't get too overwhelmed. There's so much information out there. And that was like my issue at the beginning, is I was trying to learn it all at once, you know, and I would just like burn myself out. And so, you know, just try and like maybe read 1 or 2 articles a day, or start with one part of a concept. Like with SEO, there is so much to learn, and I'm still learning every day. But start with just best practices and maybe move into some specific like strategies, or if you want to get into technical, slowly approach those topics, but do not feel like you have to know it all before you apply somewhere. Even just a basic starting knowledge is gonna take you so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and going back to something we talked about earlier around mentorship is because of that point you made, Rachel, about there being so much. I mean, I remember when I first started Matchbox, I was like, in my head, I'm like, oh, is there just like a general course I can take to help me learn about digital marketing? Sure, there's a lot out there to learn. So I think finding someone that you trust and can act as a mentor to guide you, like, where should I start? And they can even probably just ask you general questions around what is your background, what interests you, to help guide you. Here's a good place to start. Start here, and here's some other courses you can look at, because there's so many resources out there. But finding where to start was kind of the hardest part for me. So I think the mentorship piece of it. So as someone looking to get into the field, trying to find a mentorship, and maybe just for some of us that are in the field, figuring out the best way to keep ourselves open for that mentorship. And internships. And that's kind of probably most industries, but like this feels like even the most opportunity when it comes to internship, I think. So looking for those places that are open to it, and even if they're not necessarily advertising that they have internships, just like going and asking if you can do it. Would you be open to this? I'd love to help you do this. Or I have a passion for SEO. How can I help? Those are probably good starting points.
And giving the basics of certain aspects of just, like math and logic concepts and things like that, like when it comes to certain aspects of tech. And I know, for me, just like learning Excel, like knowing some tricks and great things in Excel helped me to do better research and analysis of data and things like that. And I know like this much compared to people that I've been around. And I know that there's plenty of creative ways to learn how to use things differently as well. And some of those like newer concepts are pretty cool to engage in as well.
Cool. Awesome. Those are all, I feel like, super important for people to know how to, break in. And I do want to just echo the shout out to Savvy Coders, actually, Rachel, that you had mentioned. Definitely they're a friend of the show, have been on the podcast. So that has actually been really neat. And they offer ways and definitely have a lot of women who go through the program for Savvy Coders and get into like data analytics or programming. So that is definitely a neat avenue and good way in. So just to shout them out too. And also a women-owned business too, which is great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, the next one, it's maybe, kind of going back to something we've talked about a little bit, but as far as like, other things that are left to be done, or what are things that maybe, employers or actually women can do to help make the, job market better. Or I know that, it's been thrown out of like, kind of like, be your own proponent and, help lift each other up. And I feel like that, that's extremely, good advice. But like, are there anything else that, either businesses or women can do to continue making strides?
I think being a cheerleader for other women, I know that there's sometimes, especially professionally, when there are fewer women in an industry, there seems to be more competition for roles, because it's like you see a business maybe only hiring a certain percentage of women, and then and I think that I hope I'm not biting myself in the butt by saying this, but women can be competitive with each other. And I think more women being cheerleaders for other women in this industry, or just in the world in general, I think would be really helpful. But also to the tech industry, I know one of the things that seems scary to me even now of like more intense like tech type stuff is you still get this perception that it's like your work is your life. And I feel like it's really important to, if your company does believe in a work-life balance, to express that openly. Because one thing that can be very scary is thinking that you have to jump into this company and now your coworkers are your best friends. Like you spend all your time at work, like you think about work when you're at home. You know, you're going to crash and burn real fast and jump out of that industry. But like if companies have a healthier balance they present to their employees, then you're going to have better retention overall. So I mean, that would be my advice to the tech companies in general.
I feel like women sometimes are under the perception that they have to choose motherhood or work sometimes. And like now, you know, to Amber's point that she was talking about earlier, you know, the flexibility is huge. And it's like, you don't have to give up like, you know, those soccer games or like, you know, taking them to their after school courses, you know, if that means having to work a few hours later, like it's very, very open to, you know, that whole part of being a mother and that kind of lifestyle. So, yeah. And I think also just having like the right benefits and having like providing just basic healthcare and like all the things. And that's not just for women, that's for everyone, you know, just don't ever skimp out on any of that and create an environment that is friendly to these people. Don't just talk about it, but like, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Cool. Lana, Jamie, anything else? No.
I
Okay.
think
so.
All right. How about if there you know, was a level playing field, and I know that, you know, in some cases it may feel like there is, but you know, certainly at some points I'm sure it doesn't feel like there is a level playing field for women in tech versus men. You know, what would be different if there was a level playing field? Like if all factors were equal, if, you know, women seem to get hired at, you know, the same rates as like, you know, the same opportunities seem to be open, you know, like how do you think the industry as a whole would be different, or these companies might be different?
I'm going to go back to work-life balance. Simply because I think that would be something that, you know, if there were more women in leadership and there were equal opportunities across the board, that there would be less of this like workaholic mentality that like you have to live your job and your job is your one sole thing. You know, it's like understanding that humans need to have multiple interests and be multifaceted to live like a healthy, happy life. And a work-life balance is where that can come into play for sure. And not to say that it isn't like that in a lot of places. I just know in the marketing industry, what I've experienced is a very toxic work environments, very unhealthy work-life balance experiences where you're expected to, you know, clients say jump and you say how high. So
I also think normalizing resume gaps now, because I think, you know, for women who have children in a family, and even for men, honestly, for anyone who has a family, you know, sometimes maybe they want to take some time to be with their family, to take some trips, to just live their life a little bit, or maybe they have a child who's sick and they need to like be there for them, or a parent who's sick, you know, just being more open and like seeing humans as humans and not just like producers, you know, and also like if you do hire a woman, like understand like her experience and where she's coming from, and don't be blind to some of the adversity she might experience, you know, just try and do the best you can to like be a support system and an ally for those workers, you know, and you know that should come naturally.
It's cool. Yeah, I definitely feel like as far as like playing field wise, like yeah, it's not necessarily even for people to get in there, but I do appreciate the points of like yeah, making sure that everybody's like respected and knowing that there is an environment that has that sort of that compassion and I do feel like yeah I think off the bat, Amber, you had mentioned that like yeah, if there were more women leaders, that it may lead to more companies that are leading with like this sort of idea of empathy and compassion, as opposed to like sort of like yeah, we've got to drive profits and results and everything. And it's funny because like those, in my opinion, aren't at odds. It's like the more you can lead with compassion, the more people care about potentially the organization, want to be a part of and want to help it grow, because they know that like there is an equal amount of respect. So
yeah, I mean, like if you have happy employees who want to stay with your company and who tout the aspects of your company to other people just naturally in conversation, like it's going to lead to the same level of revenue, if not more. And with less turnover, you have less that you have to spend on constantly hiring new people and training them and all those things. Like it just, I think it's all around would be good for everybody. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
no, definitely.
The other thing that came to mind for me too, if I think of if there was a level playing field, what would it look like? I think, and this is being very general, but I think in general, the tech industry may feel less, and I'm using this term here, like less Wizard of Ozzy, if that makes sense, like what's going on behind the curtain. I think that what I've seen done really well, even some of the people on this team specifically, is being able to explain tech in a way that is very easily understandable, like 100%, that makes sense. I think there's tends to be sometimes the way things are explained or described almost tries to make it feel like only I'm going to understand this, or you know what I mean? I think there's still some of that happening. So I think having women in those roles would help that, just make it feel more easy to understand, a little less scary, and more for, again, just like generally people would understand it and be a little less like, I don't know what's going on, if that makes sense at all.
I can tell you times I've had the family members that are like, wait, what do you do for a living again? And then I'll tell them, they'll be like, went right over my head.
Yeah, my husband's the same way. He tells people that I design websites, and I'm like, how many times have we talked about this? I have nothing to do with the design of the website.
Yeah, some of my relatives don't understand what I'm doing and what is my work about. And once my friend asked me, "Oh, you have a lot of different cables in your backpack," and I just was surprised. What? So maybe the equality of women and men will educate the whole population. What is technologies about? Just on the basic level, not even with deep understanding of the different technologies and everything. And like Amber, you mentioned about the revenue. I read somewhere that companies that have more women in their team has a bigger revenue comparing with the same team with only men. I can't find just here what was the statistics, but I remember such point.
Nice, I like it.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, I actually. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing I just remember my husband told that women make the teams more structured and to make processes more understandable, and I can find the word perfect. To make things more smoother and predictable, because he had the experience with the only men team, and then some women were involved, and they say, "Oh, we have some more structures small processes, and it's great.
Yeah, and I think it even opens up for a more diverse like client base, because like we're working with a client that does like breastfeeding products, you know, so it's like you need women on the team who understand that process and like can really empathize and connect with the target audience, you know.
Absolutely.
Very true.
Cool. Okay, great. I have one, kind of final thing to, and final thoughts really, for hopefully wrapping, everything up here. But, what are recommendations or feelings, words of encouragement that you would say to, I guess other women that are maybe trying to get into the industry? Anything that you think would be helpful, motivating, or otherwise?
Trying to think of something we haven't already said.
I know, right? I have one thing. I will just say it that actually Matchbox is predominantly, the Matchbox team's predominantly women, and that is a really important thing to me, I feel like, in general. Lots of wonderful diverse opinions, ideas, and just perspectives that we would absolutely never have if we didn't have the amazing members of our team. So thank you to all of you. I will say that.
I feel like it has to be something really impactful, some sort of like quote.
Don't worry.
I think the biggest
really
thing is
smart.
like you just got to go for it. Like I feel like, and every woman is different, but a lot of times we try to really prepare ourselves in every way we can, learn everything we can, like be in the best position because we want to set ourselves up for success. But it's okay to just dive in and start somewhere. And again, always like have that self-confidence and faith in yourself, because at the end of the day, you are your biggest ally. You are the person who's going to push yourself to achieve the things you want. And however that journey looks for you, whether that's learning on your own, seeking a mentor, or taking a class, whatever it is, just don't be afraid to make that first step, because that is the hardest, is taking that first step and truly believing that you have it within yourself to get there, Yeah.
And I myself am a perfectionist, and I don't know if that's tends to be more of a female trait or not, but I'm a perfectionist. But in technology, you have to learn how to fail, because you're going to make mistakes, or a test isn't going to go the way you thought it was going to go, or something is going to happen and go wrong and you're going to break something or whatever. Don't be afraid to fail, because I think everyone in this industry understands that failure is a part of it, and like breaking things is a part of it, because we don't learn new things by doing everything perfectly. We learn new things by making mistakes and then fixing them. And that's been one of my hardest life lessons, because I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah, me too. And I totally understand this. So, and for sure, you need to be ready for mistakes, and don't express them as something really bad. No, it's part of the process. You need to be ready and just fix them or try the other way. It's okay to have mistakes. And I think the tech sphere is pretty stressful because of the a lot of different situations that may come, and just think about them like a process, not like a failure. That's all.
That's great.
Yeah, and what I would say is very similar to what Rachel was saying, is just don't be scared of it. It's just like learning anything else, really, so just being open to jump in and learn. And I love the points about you're going to fail, because we've all seen that happen no matter where we've been, whether it's in tech or not. And so I do think it's refreshing that multiple people said that, because it really made me think like it really is a part of the process in the work that we do every day. Like there's going to be failures, and all we do is learn from them. So yeah, I think just not being scared, and just knowing that you will get it, you'll learn it, and then you'll probably have to relearn something the next day because it changes so quick.
Yeah, and I know with marketing specifically, like there are times that I get my stress level gets very, very high, and I start to freak out about like, meeting deadlines and whatever. And then I have to remind myself that this doesn't apply to everyone in tech, because a lot of tech does save lives. But in marketing, I'm not saving lives. Like my job, I am not like in the ER, yelling clear. Like I can close it up, give myself a breather, and come back to it later.
Mm-hmm.
So
also, like, I just thought of this one. A big thing is always vouch for your worth. Like when it comes to your salary, when it comes to your benefits, like, you have a voice. And as a woman, sometimes we are in certain, situations going to see that there is a difference when it comes to like our male counterparts. Hopefully you join a company that, has good values, and that's not going to be something you have to deal with. But if it does happen, always stand up for yourself and remember what you're worth,
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, those were all wonderful points, and honestly, this has been really cool, and actually the most amount of guests I've had on the podcast so far. So this is really great. But to Amber, Jamie, Alana, Rachel, I so much appreciate all of you participating, and really, and this was a lot of fun. So thank you.
Thank you. It was fun.
yeah.
Happy International Women's Day to all the women.
All right, awesome. Well, this has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I'm your host, Brent Feldman, and we will be back again with more content. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.